Football is back, and so is winning season at MyBookie. Use promo code Gators on a deposit of $50 or more, and you can receive up to $200 in cash instantly to your MyBookie account. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie. And Gators Breakdown is proud to partner with America's #1 meal kit, HelloFresh. Go to HelloFresh.com/50Gators and use code 50Gators for 50% off plus 15% off the next 2 months.
Gators Breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I am your host, David Waters. You can find me on social media at GatorDave_SEC. And as Billy Napier said earlier today, it's a big week. It's Tennessee week. So here we are, SEC opener for the 2023 season. Tennessee comes to town, taking on the Gators Saturday night in the Swamp. To help me break it down from an offensive perspective, you guys have seen him on gatorsbreakdown.com. He's been on Gators Breakdown before as well. Seth Varnadore joins me right here on Gators Breakdown from Varnadore Films on YouTube, where you can find his film analysis up there. Seth, you've been busy with it following this 23 season for the Gators. But, hey, first time on the 23 season, you're joining us right here on Gators Breakdown.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've been so busy I had to train my wife how to cut up video, so she's been helping me out. But she did a great job this week, so I'm excited to see how that looks going forward. But yeah, no, excited to be on for the start of SEC play. So
yeah, I got to see if I can talk my wife and my daughter into doing this too, man. So we got to get something going here. I think as I go down the road, she just turned 9, or she'll be 10 in February. I'm like, one day, maybe I can just hand all this off to her. You know, when I'm riding off into the sunset, maybe this has all become hers one day.
Just the real monotonous editing. If I could teach one of them to do that, I'd be really excited.
I hear you on that one. So yeah, we're gonna dive into this Gator offense through the first couple of games. Utah, of course, week 1. McNeese last week. You guys have seen Seth's work there, as I said, at gatorsbreakdown.com, and the latest one up there right now. Dives into the creative wrinkle in Billy Napier's offenses, and kind of how Billy Napier uses progressions to make it easier for his quarterback a bit. So go there, gatorsbreakdown.com. We'll get into a little bit of it on this episode, but head to the website there to check it out in detail there from Seth. And then, but Seth, yeah, man, hey, big game this week. We'll talk about it later too, so maybe keep this in mind a little bit, but I think it might be the first game Billy Napier's got some pressure on him a little bit.
Yeah, and if it's not this one, it'll be one in a couple weeks.
So. Exactly right.
It's coming down the pipe one way or the other.
Yeah, yes. Plenty to get into there. We'll hear from Billy Napier. He spoke to the media today on this Monday to get the thoughts of Florida heading into Tennessee. But everybody hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so yet. Like us. Hey, all those likes go a long way right there on YouTube. Your subscriptions go a long way as well. And then, of course, as I mentioned, gatorsbreakdown.com, we have a lot going on there right now. Billy Napier's press conference today. I'll put that up for you guys. Scheming with Seth, the latest there as well. And then the unfortunate, Micah Burrow or Mekhi Burrow decommits from Florida. I'll wrap up the episode with that thought as well, but you can find it at gatorsbreakdown.com. Then, of course, Gators Breakdown Plus. If you want ad-free episodes of Gators Breakdown, you can get it there at Gators Breakdown Plus. Extra episodes, access to the Discord chat. Hey, well, you can chat with Seth right there too during the games as well, and you will see what he points out. If he's not busy following USF as well at the same time. Busy man is Seth during football season, but he interacts there a good bit on that Discord with a lot of others. Kind of, if you want to get into the weeds of football, we got a channel going right there where it's just play by play and really get into deep detail about what the Gators are doing. So all that good stuff. You get a newsletter to the website as well. Gators Breakdown Plus. Link is in the description to join Gators Breakdown Plus. So, all right, Seth, go. As I said, 2 games so far. You had a tough opener versus Utah on the road, all the circumstances that come with that. And then you go to get McNeese, a team you should bowl over. Florida bowled over them like they should. You have a coaching background. You have a playing background also in what you're seeing now. How do you weigh what happened? Because we know we're going to weigh so much on what happened week 1 versus Utah. but this team kind of needed to pick up the pieces, needed to do the things they needed to do. They showed that. How do you put it up against the Utah game and the McNeese game for what this offense showed?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not going to be. I think it's almost going to end up being looking like two extremes probably for the season, where you have you played and executed probably, hopefully. I mean, we'll see, but hopefully about as bad as you could in that first game, and then this last one you played really, really clean until the very end against a really overmatched opponent. So there's not. I think there are some good things to take away from both games. You like to see a team come out and actually execute like they did this past week. I thought I was not hitting the panic button quite yet after the Utah game. There was just a lot of, they're playing a lot of young guys on both sides of the ball. And it's just guys making, these are not like these are errors that can pop up when you go on the road with a young team for the first time. So I wasn't too freaked out. Obviously, the offensive line and the run game were worrying in the first game, but I think they've got to figure out, and that's kind of what I've written about. They got to figure out a way to protect the run game, and if they can kind of be a little bit more like they were this past week, I think it'll probably be a little bit easier for them going forward offensively.
So, you've been around college coaches too. Like, maybe some insight here. How did they? For lack of a better term, how do they weigh cupcake games? What do they take away the most from that type of game where you're going to win, and if you don't, or if you play a tight game, there's some problems. But if everything goes according to plan, what do you take away from so much good?
Yeah, well, the college staff I was on, we were on in the first year of a new program, so we might have been the cupcake. But but yeah, no, every game you're just looking to go out, and it's really the same kind of goals every week, as boring as it sounds. You're looking to, if your guys go out and execute what you call, then you feel pretty happy with it. Now, just because they execute the call doesn't mean it's always going to work. That's the other part of it, because, the other team has guys on scholarship and the other team gets to call plays too. So, but you're just looking for them to go out and execute the call. And if they do that, you can feel pretty happy. I know that is a big thing. I don't know if, I'm sure Napier's got the, we're playing Florida this week type of thing, that Clemson, that's their big thing. We're playing Clemson every week when they really had it going. Now, it's not been so fun for Clemson recently, but just the idea of, hey, if you go out and execute no matter who you're playing against, that's all we can really ask you to do. And I don't think they did that against Utah. I was not really impressed in the offseason with Utah's defense, and I'm still not. Just personnel-wise, you knew they were going to be well coached and they were going to be in the right spots. But I think when they play some better offenses, they'll be in trouble. But so you didn't feel like you went out and executed at that level in week one, but week two, I mean, you really couldn't ask for much better. There was a couple things here and there, but for the most part, you did exactly what you wanted to do pretty much the whole game.
All right, Seth, so we know the big changes for Florida. We've seen a spring game. We've seen Utah. We've seen McNeese. No more Anthony Richardson. And go back to it too a little bit. No more Levi Lewis for Billy Napier. Guys that can make something happen with their legs, get out of trouble. We saw the issues there for Graham Mertz of not necessarily being able to get out of the trouble on the road at Utah. So this offense does change a bit, and with the style of quarterback. So a spring game, 2 games so far. What differences, besides, of course, the obvious of having an athletic quarterback? I know it's only 2 games, so I know small sample size here too, but are there any differences you've seen so far that you expect to carry over into the next 10 games for the Gators?
Well, I thought, coming out of year one, I had a couple things, there was a lot of doubts about the passing game, but it seemed pretty apparent as you watched the whole year and went back and looked that they tried some things early in the year last year in terms of the quick passing game and some RPO game that they just ended up trashing just because for one reason or another, they couldn't do it very well, whether it was personnel at receiver or it just didn't fit what the quarterback was doing well. So in the offseason, I was hoping you'd see a lot more in the screen game and a lot more in the quick passing game. I think we've seen that evolution in the screen game, and they're doing it in interesting ways. It's not just we're calling a screen. On most of these plays, if you go back and watch, they're calling 2 screens. They're calling a screen to both sides of the field. And this part I don't know, so I can't say for sure, but sometimes teams will do that and they'll have the quarterback read something pre-snap or post-snap to decide which screen he's going to throw. But they're doing that pretty much on every screen they call. You can even go back to the Utah game. The screens, if they're through a screen one way, if you look at the other side, they're running a screen there too. So that could all be for just eye candy and window dressing, but they could be reading that as well. And then the obvious one is, the lack of quarterback run game. And I think really the lack of the threat of the quarterback run game, which was more at times last year, was more of a factor than the actual quarterback run game. But, just being able to hold the backside a little bit with just the threat of the quarterback running, that keeps people off the backside of your run game. And they're trying to control it this year, I think, with screens. You saw a little bit of RPO against McNeese, but they're going to have to, I think, get that going a little bit more. And I really thought against Utah, some intermediate, like 9 to 12, 6 to 12 yard play action stuff. So some kind of play action quick game stuff, play action intermediate passing game stuff would have been really helpful as they stacked the box against you. But, so far, not a ton different. There's a little, I think the screen is like the biggest thing that sticks out, but I'd imagine you'll see more as the season goes on.
You mentioned there, and look, we know going back from the spring, and we heard it a whole lot from fall camp, from maybe one of the first closed practices that went through, and there were some eyeballs there, and then we had the open practice on the Saturday. Then we got some scrimmages, and the words coming out was, all right, Graham Mertz is going to excel and even maybe live in that short to intermediate range. Well, we've seen that translate as well. That's pretty much been the whole offense so far with Graham Mertz in this passing game. Are you seeing a lot of called shots down the field? Is it not pulling the trigger? As I said, I know, guys, I know I won't. This is probably the last time I say it. Small sample size. We know 2 games. But Utah did a good job of defending this Florida offense. McNeese just played 3 deep, and
they weren't letting anything behind.
Yeah, so that plays into it as well. And we hear so much, and you talked about boring football terms. Well, here's one more too. We're going to take what the defense gives us, and that's exactly what Florida did Saturday night. But at the same time, with those 3 deep safeties, was there still some routes going down the field, and Mertz just taking advantage and basically giving what the defense is giving him? And I guess compared it to a year ago as well, can that still be a staple of this offense, or is it even a limitation of Graham Mertz as well?
Yeah, I think that's the thing that, I think a lot of people are clamoring for some more explosive in the passing game, but the 2 teams you've played have both tried to keep a top on the offense and take away those explosive passing plays. And that is, I think the first time we ever talked was in a Twitter space last year before the Kentucky game. And that's kind of what we talked about. Hey, this is what Kentucky likes to do. They like to keep a top on the offense and make you slowly, methodically, efficiently move the ball down the field. That's pretty much what Utah, I think, decided to do. And then you saw McNeese. I think they went for the death by 1,000 cuts approach. I guess putting like 5 guys in the box wasn't the best strategy, but I guess it could have been 80-0 if they just gave up shots all game. So I think that's not for lack of trying to get the ball down the field, and that's why you're seeing a lot of these are check downs. So it's good to see the quarterback get to the check down, but I don't think the explosive passing right now is for lack of trying to push the ball vertically. But I think where they could maybe improve is you can get explosive passing. They don't have to all be air yards.
Yeah.
Hit somebody intermediate on the run and get a little run after catch, and then you can generate those explosives. That might be how you have to do it if people keep trying to put a top on. Because going into last year, I didn't think Florida was going to be very good throwing the ball, just because I didn't think they were explosive enough at receiver. So when they were able to generate that much explosive passing game last year, that was a sign to me that there was some good design in the offense. Because going into the year, I'm like, who's the explosive receiver? Because you had some guys that were straight line fast, but nobody with a lot of wiggle or anything. So the fact that they were able to be so explosive, I thought was a good sign last year. And this year, people are going to make you be efficient, it seems like, so far. So the fact that your quarterback's getting to the check down, I think, is good. And now you need to get into more of that intermediate. I think, just the intermediate passing game, that'll kind of help take it to the next level, especially if you get some run after catch opportunities.
Yeah, that's where I see the explosives coming from too. And I said that before the season. I didn't think it was going to be this apparent 2 games in.
Yeah.
I really do think that's all. That's pretty much all they're going to come from. Now, maybe we'll see how teams, if you start getting explosives through that short intermediate, then maybe you start, maybe the defenses that you start playing adjust, and then you can hit those. I mean, because we know Napier loves them, and that goes to my next point here. JP Gator, who's in the Gator Discord, Gators Breakdown Plus Discord with us a lot as well. He wanted to get your opinion on, because it would be interesting to see what Seth thinks the obvious counters are for teams looking to take away the deep shot play action game on early downs. Something we know Billy Napier did a whole lot of last year, and just use AR's freak of an arm to throw it 70 yards down the field. Even with the quarterback change, that's not as likely as it was last year. But, for those, what do you see defenses doing, for maybe a staple of this Billy Napier offense, making sure it doesn't come to fruition?
Yeah, if people are going to just keep a top on the defense, that's the thing. You can't, if you design it well enough and you kind of call it well enough, they shouldn't be able to both keep a top on the defense and load the box for the running game, right? If you do that, you should have some openings in the intermediate area to throw the ball. So that's what I thought was kind of lacking against Utah. You could tell early they did not want to allow explosive in the passing game. They were going to put 3 deep on most plays. Sometimes it was a 2 high shell. They did move, for 3 high to 2 high, but you usually had at least 2 guys deep over the top. And then you had a bunch of other dudes playing hard for the run. Anytime they saw downhill run action, you could see linebackers and safeties fly to the ball.
Well, that reminded me so much of Kentucky.
Yes, that's what I think that's the blueprint people are going to use, and that's what I would have. If I'm playing Florida the last 2 or 3 years, that's what I'm using. Make them, especially Mullins last year, and even maybe the year prior. No, maybe not the year prior, but his last year for sure.
Yeah,
make the Florida shot themselves in the foot against Kentucky with penalties, and it was kind of okay. This is kind of this is, I think, the recipe to make them, because really elite offenses can slowly, methodically move the ball down the field. Not elite offenses, you're not going to be consistent getting 8 yards at a time. That's why people put such an emphasis on explosive plays, because as soon as you hit one, your chance of scoring on that drive just rockets up. So to me, if people are going to put a top on the defense to take away the explosive shots, you've got to have, I would take advantage of the aggressiveness against your run game with some play action and hit him in that 10-yard window. See if you can hit a guy on the run. I thought there were opportunities against Utah. If you just call a slant, because there were times looked like they were playing 8 guys in the box, cover 3, the corner's playing way outside. If you just ran a slant to Pearsall off a really hard run action, he catches it, and if he beats one guy, he's gone. So I think there's opportunities for that. And maybe that's not what they anticipated coming into the year, but that and then, just their play action stuff that they were really good at last year. They got to keep with the boot stuff. I thought was good against Utah, but they didn't get to it a ton. So those are the kind of things that I think that is that intermediate area that they did a pretty good job with last year at times attacking, and they did against Tennessee, where you get the guy over the top, and you get Pearsall kind of in that intermediate 15 to 20 yard area a few times last year. I think they need to kind of really wear that out.
Yeah, it was, and especially you mentioned the being able to go 8 yards almost every play.
That's tough.
Especially with what we've seen from Florida so far, is field position has not been the best.
No.
So you're asking a lot from this offense to.
You're not going to see a ton of 11-play drives against good defenses.
No, you're not. Exactly. And that, I was mentioning about special teams before the season even started, that we don't know what this offense is going to be yet, but at least give them a hand. Well, it's even more apparent now. They absolutely need every bit of special teams help to reduce some of the number of plays in these drives. So let's keep it going. One of your points on your most recent article there, Scheming with Seth on gatorsbreakdown.com, you mentioned the flood concept and how that's been helping Billy Napier and make it easy for his quarterbacks. But as we kind of maybe transition to this run game, and it was shut down versus Utah, and we were talking about it on the Discord as well, maybe Florida's now got to find some ways to get creative in the run game. And you mentioned, with a running quarterback, the backside defenses had to worry about it a whole lot. So now can they scheme something together to where that backside basically still has to be accounted for? Now we saw the Trey Wilson, direct snap and him take it, but when Graham Mertz is at quarterback, what can they do to make sure they can't just key in on the middle of the offensive line and keep every run 2-3 yards? Can all the motions come into play? Can Graham Mertz maybe even keep a couple of more? I know he's not the fastest guy in the world, but 5 yards a pop or something like that to keep a defense honest. What are things Florida can do when Graham Mertz is at quarterback that can really maybe open up this run game a bit, where Florida can get creative?
Yeah, I think the motion stuff is important. I've coached in the past. We didn't have athletic guys we were a zone team. We didn't have athletic guys at quarterback, but we'd use the jet motion, even like that orbit motion where he goes behind, and really, like they did against Utah, give Wilson a reverse. That'll slow the backside down. If you give him one early and he takes it for a long run, that'll slow them down. Give him a jet sweep, that'll slow it down. Then I think if you're looking at, then that's really more, that could work on two levels. But if you're really, what I think Florida's getting to is people are starting to take the defensive end, let him fly down and get the linebacker over the top for the quarterback if he pulls it on boot. Because that's really the first answer for most people is if your backside defensive end is going to fly down to run, well, now we're going to run boot. The quarterback will pull it, and we'll run play action the other way. Teams have started to bring two guys off that edge. So what can you do there to kind of slow that down? That's when I think you need to get into a little bit more like true RPO game, which I think they can do. Mertz has shown he can do it in the past, and I think you feel better with your guys you have playing receiver this year. So that could be part of it. But then, in terms of the run game, if the zone stuff's not working, I thought they've done really well, and they did against Utah running some gap schemes where you're down blocking and pulling guys instead of just moving in zone. That lets you get a little bit more downhill, whereas the zone sometimes is a little bit more horizontal before it gets vertical. So if you maybe we need this thing to hit a lot faster just because we're not holding blocks as well this year for whatever reason. So maybe you go to a little bit more downhill gap runs, and they've done really well with those. I think against Utah, they only ran it a few times, but it was the most successful runs of the game by far. So you can mix more of that in possibly, but there's answers, and you can do it either in the way you design your run games or with the motions or even RPO stuff. But there's ways to control that backside, and once you do that, get guys out of the box or at least slow them down, that's when you get those big cutbacks in the run game.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Tennessee did a pretty good job in this Florida run game last year, especially the running back. So is the game going to be more on Mertz's arm? Can Florida get the run game going? And I think with the game versus Utah and what Tennessee was able to do last year versus these pretty good backs, the run game is going to have us work cut out for them there. And we'll get into it. Some good news for the Gators as well. Getting an important starter back along the offensive line. So we'll get that back. We'll hear from Billy Napier about that later on here in the episode. But so we'll transition just a bit. So Seth's background, guys, most of you know if you've listened to Gators Breakdown before, but it's an offensive background, more of an offense. Seth knows the offensive side of the ball. But of course, if you know ball, you know ball. But we're going to go to the other side of the ball just for a second right here on defense. And no turnovers, Seth, in the first two games for the Gators defense. I mean, oh, so close. I mean, there's probably some interceptions that they certainly should have. Utah's quarterback, Nate Johnson, was fumbling all over the place, too.
He had two bounce right back up to that. Yeah, that made you feel like, okay, it's just maybe not their night tonight.
Yeah.
So, but
I mean, yeah, it's so close. So hopefully they all come about right here versus Tennessee this week. But only 2 sacks the first 2 games as well. But the defense is still doing their job so far, really making teams earn it with new faces, young players. From an offensive perspective, what differences have you picked up on Austin Armstrong's defense compared to what we saw from Patrick Toney last year?
Well, I think just in terms of personality. So I was able to go for the last couple of years at least. We'll see if it continues to happen. Maybe be on your show. It might get me too much notoriety here, but I've been able to go to the coaching clinic and kind of sit in and watch spring practice. Watch a full practice, not just the media portion, the last couple of years, and then get to hear the coaches talk and give kind of clinic presentations. And I sat in with Armstrong this year, and I was really impressed by him, not just in terms of his football acumen, but just demeanor and just kind of even though he's a young guy, the way he talked about the game. I was really impressed with him, and I think his style just kind of fits better than Patrick Toney's style, even though the scheme is really not much different. I'd have to look at the numbers. I think Armstrong may like to kind of do stuff out of one high safety a little bit more than Toney did, or Toney liked a little bit more two high safety stuff. I'm not sure if the numbers bear that out yet, but that's kind of was the reputation coming in. But that allows, one safety to be down in the box, be a little bit more aggressive. I know you mentioned Castell, I think, in the first game against Utah, how they had him kind of down in the box, playing pretty tight. So that allows you to kind of take away run stuff too, if you can play your safeties down there. But I think just demeanor and just kind of style of play that he prefers is a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more, willing to play man kind of outside, or man looks outside, play a little bit tighter coverage and kind of mix that stuff in. I think that's kind of the biggest difference. Is probably just it seems a little bit more aggressive. Toney was a really smart guy and a really sharp guy, but he seemed a little bit more passive, maybe a little bit more laid back.
It almost seemed like he was afraid to mess up.
I think he's just I think it's, that could, I don't know if that's it, but he was definitely a really calm, passive guy, probably an excellent teacher. And I heard him give a talk as well. He was really smart, but he was very matter of fact. Like, this is how we do it. This is what we do. And I think Armstrong's getting a little bit of benefit of stuff Toney put in last year, and kind of the second year of the tackling has been one. I've heard people talk about, hey, they practice tackling. It's like they started doing that last year too. Like every segment of tackle, that started last year, but they've been doing it now for a full year. But I think a lot of it to me is demeanor. He's just, Armstrong's a little more aggressive. He's from the region. Maybe he understands a little more, connects with the players a little bit better. That's all kind of conjecture on my part. But I just think, to me, Florida defensively is an aggressive defense when they're at their best. So I think his style fits the personnel better. And I think that might be the biggest difference. And there, as Napier said a ton of times, it's second year in the system. That stuff all helps too. But I don't know if you'd be seeing the kind of same, maybe the results could be similar, but the physicality and the way they're playing, the guys really flying around. That first sack of the game against McNeese, that thing happened in a hurry, right? Just that kind of, I think that comes not only with more reps, right, second year of the system, but also I think his demeanor and his willingness to be aggressive. And if he gives up an explosive every now and then, he's all right with it, but he's going to be aggressive. I think that kind of rubs off on the players a little bit.
All right, here's first time we'll hear from Billy Napier. He was asked about the Tennessee offense today from the media and get his thoughts on that. But let's hear from Napier on the Tennessee offense. We'll get Seth's thoughts on that offense as well. There is another offense that's going to be on the field Saturday, and one that's pretty explosive in its own right. But let's hear Billy Napier's thoughts on the Tennessee offense.
I think obviously the uniqueness of the offense, the tempo. They're snapping the ball. They run about 3 plays a minute, right? So I think they're first or second in the country in pace, right? So there's an element to that that's unique. We can speed the tempo up, but we don't do it every play. But I do think, the uniqueness, in a typical week, right? So they've had success moving the ball and scoring points, and I think there's an element to that. You get not only the personnel, but also just systematically, right? So how are you going to play them? What's your fastball going to be? What are your curveballs? What's your slider? And how can you dictate the pace of the game a little bit? I think there's some things to that. So I've got a lot of respect for what they do.
A lot of respect for that Tennessee offense, does Billy Napier. And hey, Seth and I were talking before show. Hey, we got a connection here to this offense, so it's even better analysis here with Seth, because guys, if you don't know, Seth has a big time connection to USF as well. And Seth, let us know, USF hired a new coach, and you know what? He came from Tennessee.
Yeah, Alex Golish is USF's new head coach. He was Tennessee's offensive coordinator. They're running pretty much the same exact thing, maybe a few wrinkles here and there, but for the most part, it's Tennessee's offense. And first game of the year, they had about 100 plays. So, it's It's the interesting part about the offense is it kind of, first of all, I think the biggest misconception, and we got a chance to talk with Coach Golish, and I asked him, why do people always talk about the passing game? Because it's really, you guys are really a run first team. He's like, I don't know. You got to ask other media people, but that's really, this system is built to spread you out to run the football. And then once you bring guys in to stop the run, that's where they start throwing the screens, use the run game and play action to hit RPOs and explosives. And then the pace is what the pace with the pounding from the run game gets you thinking slow. And then what they do a little bit different than kind of the traditional systems. They do a little bit more motion. I think you saw a lot of hurry up, no huddle teams that didn't do a ton of motion, so the quarterback could see a picture pretty clearly. They asked the receivers to do a lot of identification of coverages. And so those guys will have option routes and things like that. So they can go really fast. We were talking about it before, but I asked him, hey, even the ball boys seemed involved, and he wouldn't give me any information. He said that was a trade secret. But you watch the Tennessee ball boys, you'll see them sprinting up to the line of scrimmage. You'll see them helping up guys on the sideline. Those guys are super involved. And it's just something that permeates the entire organization, this speed. But I think the one thing that, if you really want to give them some issues, if you can stop the run game, basically as light a box you can. That's why Georgia was able to kind of wear them out last year. They didn't have to stack the box to stop the run because they had some animals up front. But if you can stop the run game with a light-ish box, you can give them a lot of problems.
Yeah, big hope for this Florida defensive line that we've talked all season about being a deeper front, being a better front with all the bodies they have up there now. And this is going to be the Utah didn't run as good as I thought they did or thought they could. Florida did a good job in stopping that run game, but this is a different style of run game that Tennessee is going to be bringing to the table. So be eager to see. How would you say Florida prepares for this offense? I mean, is it a benefit of playing so early in the season to where you probably can do some of these things in the offseason leading up to it? Or is it really just, all right, we'll take the experience that we had from last year, even though it's a different quarterback, we can translate it to this year. But how often would you say Florida could maybe put some, game plan in as you build up to the season, knowing this game's only the third game of the season?
I'd imagine they'd have to have, especially with, you may have a clip, but the kind of the importance of the game, Napier said, and them talking about it in camp, just talking about just the game in general. I'd imagine they had some type of period, probably not every day, but they probably had some type of period, a couple times a week, maybe during camp. And teams will work tempo, and you can make it really hard on the defense by having kind of two offenses ready to go. So one offense goes, the next one runs on and runs the play, and you just kind of do that.
And that was a famous story of Urban Meyer and Charlie Strong preparing for the 2008 Oklahoma National Championship game, which I think Heupel was he the OC of that?
He may have been on staff. Kevin Wilson, I think, was the OC.
Wilson, that's right. Right. Yeah. But that was a famous story of having two offenses ready to go. So you've got to be ready. So that's kind of the most famous story about the speed and practicing for this kind of tempo of the offense.
And I think when Napier talked about kind of being rules based on defense and offense, because you want to be able to play in different tempos and different settings, I believe you spoke about that today. That's kind of, there's a lot of, consternation about the defense not getting set and moving and like popping their heads up during the Utah game. A lot of that was because it seemed like when Utah would exchange strength, so they'd move the tight end from one side to the other, Florida was trying to match the switch in strength. I'd imagine that kind of stuff's probably out the window this week. And so they are just going back to kind of, hey, this is your rule, whether or not you just got to know, hey, if he moves, now I'm on the weak side, I'm on the strong side. So they'll probably kind of eliminate that kind of stuff, I would imagine. If they don't, then they can get on you in a hurry. But
because I noticed Princely doing that. And he almost right before the snap, he's going from one side to the other.
Typically, if you watch, it typically is when a tight end moves.
Yeah,
he's probably switching the strengths. I don't know if he might just be a weak side player or something, maybe. But I think typically that's when you see that, and then they don't bump too much interiorly, but I know he does make that. He kind of travels with that tight end a little bit. So now they like motion. Tennessee will run motion, but you probably can't treat it the same way, I wouldn't imagine.
No. All right, yeah, there we go. Look at the Florida offense, a little bit at the Tennessee offense as well. There, with Seth giving some really good insight on the Tennessee offense that I wasn't even expecting when we came into here. At least I was expecting good insight, not as in depth as I thought we would get there. I just glossed over the Tennessee connection at USF now. So
yeah, I was excited when they hired the guy. I was like, all right, I get to see this up a little more close and personal every weekend now. So it's been now they don't, like I said, they don't really give you any of their trades to. They keep that thing pretty tight-lipped, but just getting to see it's interesting.
Yeah, Josh Heupel was the quarterbacks coach there in 08. So, there we go. Sam Bradford, Josh Heupel there together under Bob Stoops in the national championship game versus the Gators. So, all right, we'll get to hear some more from Billy Napier about this big game coming up right here this weekend in the Swamp. But before we get there, as a bettor, you demand perfection, and MyBookie delivers. NFL, college football, and a brand new cash-out system gives you options to bet and win all season long. First two legs of your parlay hit, wouldn't then cash out early, use the funds on another bet, or just let it ride for a chance at a bigger payday. Join the MyBookie family for an entire season filled with odd boosts, free bets, and super contests. This season, MyBookie has a no-strings-attached cash bonus that lets you deposit and withdraw quick. Use promo code Gators on a deposit of $50 or more, and you can receive up to $200 in cash instantly to your MyBookie account. Bet your deposit amount once, and you're ready to cash out at any time. Again, that's at MyBookie using promo code Gators to claim your cash deposit bonus today. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie. And Gators Breakdown is proud to partner with America's #1 meal kit, HelloFresh. Hey, HelloFresh, they got it all going for you. If you work a full-time job, you got a family, you need all the time that you can get. Well, Gators Breakdown is bringing you HelloFresh. I mean, look, you need all the time you can get out there. Everybody's busy. School back in session, football season. Well, HelloFresh wants you to have it all. Free time, easy and fresh, tasty food. So they take care of the meal planning, deliver all the ingredients for you. No trip to the store needed. When you need dinner fast, don't call for delivery. Think HelloFresh. Fast and fresh recipes are ready in just 15 minutes or less. Take your pick from 40 weekly recipes that suit your lifestyle, from veggie to family-friendly to fit and wholesome. Right now is the time to join. Go to HelloFresh.com/50Gators and use code 50Gators for 50% off, plus 15% off your next 2 months. That's HelloFresh.com/50Gators. Use code 50Gators for 50% off, plus 15% off the next 2 months. Get your time back with HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. All right, big SEC opener for the Gators this week versus Tennessee. Let's hear from Billy Napier about how big this game is.
I do think that it's a big week. It's Tennessee week. I think we've done a ton relative to educating our players about the rivalry. We do have some veteran players that understand that have played in the game. But it's time for SEC play. And certainly this is an Eastern Division opponent as well. So there's magnitude of that. I think it's a big weekend for Gator Nation. We play at home, and we play a really good opponent. I think anytime you play a rival, it's a big game. You play in an Eastern Division opponent, SEC play, home opener when it comes to the SEC. It certainly has a program. I mean, there's magnitude here, but I would tell you they all matter, right? I mean, I don't necessarily think there's one that doesn't matter on our schedule. So I think the big key here is that we focus on what's going to help us play better, and I think that's the whole key to the drill. Having been played in these games in the past, ultimately today's Monday. Let's go do Monday as best we can. Let's try to put our team in position to win the game.
Seth, there's always pressure as a Florida head coach, but I think this is the first single game. I think I can put it on Napier where, hey, this is. I think the first time he's facing some pressure going into a game. Now, don't get me wrong, Utah, a couple of weeks ago or a couple games ago, there's pressure there, but losing that game puts even more so on this. And I think heading into a game, it's Florida's got to look good. You're at home. You've got a chance to maybe, kind of rally the troops again. And there's some pressure, I think, on Billy Napier a little bit. You've heard all the, the offseason talk about maybe not being the right guy for the job. And Florida loses to Utah, and I'm going to confirm what a lot of people are saying. Way, way, way too early for that talk. But, I mean, it would look pretty bad to start the season 1-2. I know some people predicted it out there. It is a very, very tough schedule. You got 2 top 10 opponents or 2 top 15-ish opponents to start the season with. But you know what? That's life in the SEC. That's life when you schedule a game like Utah, the first game of the season as well. I mean, there is some pressure on Billy Napier, I think, for the first time to go out there and get a victory, and it ain't gonna be easy versus Tennessee.
Yeah, I think, especially kind of when he was hired and kind of where Tennessee was at, I think fans could understand in year 2 if you're still behind Georgia, but to see kind of Tennessee, jump ahead in terms of perception, at least as that next team up in the East. Yeah, and then being 0-2 against them would put, I think, a lot of pressure on you going forward. And it really makes kind of, you can't really afford to lose any other toss-ups kind of the rest of the year. Yeah. Because you have quite a few in conference. You lose too many of those, and now the pressure really ratchets up. It's important. I think if, depending on, they could lose the game and then still have a really good season, depending on how they, come out of it and what Tennessee ends up being. But, to see the way, the off season, I think people were, especially when the win total came out, all right, 7, that seems all right. 6 and 7 wins, that seems okay. And then as soon as they lose to Utah, it's like, holy cow, this guy needs to be fired. It's like, all right, now if you start 1-2 with another loss to Tennessee, the pressure definitely ratchets up. And I think on the other end, if you win this, it relieves so much of that. So it's kind of a real pivot point for him. If they go in and win this game, especially if they, they come out and win convincingly, then I think everyone's really happy. You get some momentum going into the conference season. Should be an easy one the next week, and then from there you get to take off into the full conference schedule. But yeah, it's a real pivot point here for him, I think.
It really is. It really is. And you got Tennessee and Kentucky. You got Charlotte sandwiched in between those 2 teams. So hey, look, a win, and I think the worry of I've brought it up before, this team handling momentum a little bit. It hasn't really been so well for Billy Napier. But if you do win, well, okay, you got Charlotte the week after. So if you do take a fall down or a step down, you're probably not going to lose that game anyway. So it gives you, another week to prepare for Kentucky. But yeah, just looking at this, hey, look, it's been a while since 2003, 2004, since Florida's lost back-to-back games to Tennessee, all the way back to the Ron Zook days. So it's been forever. Tennessee has not historically played well in the Swamp. Joe Milton was quarterback last time they came to the Swamp. He started that game, if people don't remember that. So, and then, of course, Florida wins that game a couple of years ago, and Dan Mullen's last year still beat Tennessee in the Swamp that last year for Dan Mullen. But yeah, it's and Seth, going to the point about pressure, and you mentioned, Tennessee being that team that's kind of pegged themselves behind Georgia. If you're a Gator fan, you don't even like looking at the rankings right now. You kind of look outside of this. You got Georgia 1, Florida State is 3, Tennessee is in the top 10, LSU is ranked, Tennessee's ranked, Miami is now ranked. I mean, all your rivals have gotten some big wins, or winning titles in the last 2 years. Miami coming off the A&M win, so it pegs them up a little bit this year. I mean, this is like, okay, you could beat Tennessee, then you can start putting yourself back into that conversation with those other teams that are doing some good things. But now, you got your in-state teams with some big wins. FSU already with a win versus LSU. Miami with a win versus A&M. I mean, this is a time to get some good feeling, some good talk about Florida, and not so much your rivals right now.
Yeah, it really feels like having that Thursday game and just kind of being the only one on TV really soured. If it was just on Saturday of that week, it would have been like, it kind of would have came and gone, I think, without a ton of negativity. But being on that Thursday, you had, and then the 10 days between that, I mean, we got to like Monday last week. I'm like, man, they need to play a game. Like we need to get to a game soon, because we're just rehashing the same stuff over and over and over.
And it didn't help that McNeese was the next game, because
so nobody cared.
You weren't turning the page until Saturday. Yeah. You had to stew on that.
So and so you're basically in the same situation. You're not the only game on TV here, but you kind of got a snoozer probably after this one. So
Yeah.
that's another. You got a lot of time to stew on it, and like you mentioned, it'd be nice to get some positive momentum going again as your kind of rivals. You know when I looked at the top 25, I was like, man, they still got to play 4 or 5 more of these teams. That's what I was looking at. I was like, man, Utah is like, I'm not sure where they are now. I know when I looked last week, they're like 15. They're maybe up to like 12-ish. And I'm like, Florida State's there, Georgia. I was like, holy cow. So yeah, if you can cross one off the list, I think you feel pretty good. I mean, who knows what's going to happen with LSU? They've kind of been weird looking. But yeah, you feel really good about the rest of the year, I think, if you can win this one. And if you don't, man, that negativity starts to skyrocket again.
Yeah, a lot of it's, like I said, because of what your rivals are doing. So it's time to actually beat a rival. And because another thing, Billy Napier has not had the luck with rivals. So we would kind of put that feather in his cap, too, to get something going and kind of change the fortunes there. But yeah, I think Swamp's ready. I think the fans are ready for a big game here Saturday night in the Swamp there. But yeah, a little bit of pressure on Billy Napier, I think, for the first time to go out there and make sure he gets a victory. Look, year one, you get a whole lot of passes. I don't think there's any pressure for wins in year one. But now losing to Utah to start year two puts a lot of pressure on this game for Billy Napier here. So, hey, something that can help that pressure just a little bit, and hey, in more ways than one, would be getting your starting center back, but also maybe unearthing a new right tackle right there in Lindell Hudson.
Third tackle, very capable player. I think he's impressed me. He did just show up in June, so there's an element to that. I think he's continuing to learn and grow and develop more knowledge of the system. I think every week he gets a little bit better. But yeah, it gives us a swing tackle there, which we didn't have in the opener. He had some issues there. So if we get Kingsley back this week, which I think will be a positive. And look, Jake Slaughter was player of the game. He played significantly better week 1 to week 2. So I think there's some elements of that's helped us from developing some depth.
Yep, so Jake Slaughter starts the first 2 games for the Gators at center. Good news that Kingsley is back there for the Gators. But look, I was impressed with Hudson. He played a lot more snaps than I thought he would in this game there at right tackle. And he comes in, and Seth, you see a shuffle along the offensive line. I see George at left tackle, and other guys shuffling in, other guys playing guard and center. Richie Leonard's moving around there for the Gators, and it was pretty interesting to see all those pieces. And it was early on versus McNeese as well. I think they felt pretty comfortable that they could do that early and often, and maybe try and figure out all these combos up front. But really big, important news that Kingsley Aguakin is back at center for the Gators.
Yeah, and I think the center position is underrated in terms of how important it is. I think it's, I think a lot of people understand that it's important, but even just not just in the passing game, like a lot of people think protections, but some zone run games, the center kind of points to where, he kind of points to where he's going, and then other guys will make their kind of determination where they end up off that. There's some teams that play like that. So he points to a guy and says, that's my guy. And then everybody else kind of works off him. So if they're doing that in the run game, he becomes even more important there, just in terms of helping identify, hey, these are the guys we're going to be blocking probably in the zone play here. So, getting him back, I think, will be really important. And they were able to, unfortunately, he couldn't play in week 1, but they're able to kind of rest him, I think, give him extra time to get ready for last week. And so hopefully, Tennessee's in a similar situation too. I think they're getting their center back this week as well. So, that it's underrated. I think how long it's really hard to just plug and play on offensive line to start. That's why when you have Florida State's not great up front, but they're all played together a lot, so they can kind of get around it a little bit. But Florida, you have all these new guys with transfers and all these other things, and then to have one of your experienced guys go out, that just adds a little bit more to it, a little bit more second guessing of maybe where I'm supposed to go. So to get him back, I think is really helpful. And then Hudson's a guy, I actually coached against him when he was in high school. I was helping my brother out, and he coached against him. He's an athletic kid. They would split him out sometimes, like out wide, and just he wouldn't be a receiver, but he'd be split out wide, kind of like what Florida used to run the Emory and Henry with Spurrier. They'd flex him all the way out there, and he'd go out there and block some poor 150-pound corner, But he looked, and I thought he looked pretty. He looked like he could move in the game the other night. So I was pleasantly surprised to see how many snaps he got, and he can be a helpful guy. And with all that shuffling, that probably tells me they're just trying to say, hey, we've got a lot of guys that are similar. What's the combination to get the best 5 on the field? So that's probably kind of what they're looking through and see if I could, maybe I can move this guy over here and that lets me play this guy who might be a little bit better there, but you can work your combinations out that way, but you can get your best 5 on the field now that you have a little bit more depth coming back.
Yeah, and Napier said in that soundbite, hey, in the first game, we kind of struggled at that spot, letting me know maybe if he'd have been available, he maybe would have made a switch there to take George out, maybe put Hudson in.
That's kind of what I thought. That's how I felt hearing that too. You talking about that earlier. So yeah, he looks the part, man, and he's athletic. That right tackle spot was a little cursed, coming into this season. I think you're kind of on like your 3rd or 4th option. And what you thought coming into, you had Waits get hurt, right? You thought he might be the guy. Then
Tarquin.
Then Waits, and then the Goodwin kid came in, right? And then he had to leave, and then George. Maybe the vision for it was play him at guard and one of these other guys at tackle, and then you had to play him at tackle. And now you get Hudson back, so that's helpful. So we'll see how much he plays this week. That'll be kind of an interesting subplot.
Yeah, and Tennessee's got a really good front. I think they do. So I think there'll be a really stiff test there for that Florida offensive line. And if we do see the struggles, maybe we'll see how, or maybe he starts. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. Some bad news to end the episode with, of course. I don't know if you missed it today, guys. Hopefully you did, but I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. Mekhi Burrow decommits from Florida, defensive lineman from the state of Georgia. 6'5", 390 pounds, 706th overall player, 72nd defensive lineman on 24/7 Sports. Of course, now Florida 21 commits for the class of 2024. It does not change the ranking for Florida's class. They still stay 3rd on 24/7 Sports on their own 3 industry rankings. He is from the state of Georgia. Seems like Georgia will be getting another large mammoth of a human being there on the defensive line. Burrow, we kind of thought maybe be a little underrated. I think it was a pick over Georgia at the time. Probably would end up at Georgia to kind of continue, what they're putting together on defense there. So Florida's class now has 2 5-stars, 13 4-stars, 6 3-stars. And there, of course, headlined by quarterback DJ Lagway there. So, unfortunate news there, Seth. Defensive tackle, big body there for Florida's done a pretty good job of recruiting defensive line, but man, you get somebody the 6'5", 390 pounds. There's not many that fit that profile,
especially ones that can move a little bit.
Yeah, so Florida got to go pivot there, but at least it was on September 11th and not in December or something like that.
Yeah, better than having a Marcus Stroud where he's pulling the Gator shirt off on Sports Illustrated cover. Better than that, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. So that's the first bad news on recruiting in a bit as far as decommitments go there for the Gators. If you want more info there, gatorsbreakdown.com. Got that highlighted there for you guys. So, all right, Seth, hey, man, thanks for hopping on. Florida, Tennessee. Anytime. Big game this week. Will Miles had to go out of town, but I knew exactly where I was going to turn for my Monday episode. So I was going to get you on anyway. But Will's like, I'm heading out of town next week. I was like, okay, it just works out anyway. So, we're good. We're good. Sometimes things just
I'm glad you told me that after. I would have felt a lot of pressure to fill Will's shoes before that. So I'm glad you waited on
that. Good stuff. But hopefully next week, talking about a victory there. What time is the USF game Saturday? Will you get to watch? Do you have to bleed
over? They play a team you probably wouldn't want to play this week. They play. They have Alabama traveling to Tampa to play at 3:30. So. The Alabama Crimson Tide, yes. So, I'll get to see old Nick Saban on the field there, down on the field, and see him after the game in the press conference.
Well, it is at 3:30 Saturday.
So that'll be fun. So, I'll get home. But like I said, I got the wife trained up now, so she'll have the first part of the game ready for me. So that'll be nice.
All right, there we go. And hopefully Seth, scheming with Seth next week's breaking down a whole lot of Gator plays that have led to a victory.
Yeah, that'd be lovely. Some explosive pass plays. Come on, let's see.
There we go. Seth Varnadore. Find his Varnadore Films, right, Seth, on YouTube. Find in-depth videos there, even more so than what he does on gatorsbreakdown.com. Glad to have him on board right there, helping us out right there, getting that website going. So Find him right there, Varnadore Films on YouTube. I'm the host of Gators Breakdown, David Waters. You can find me on X, Twitter, social media, whatever it is, at GatorDave_SEC. Guys and girls out there, thank you for joining us on this episode of Gators Breakdown.